Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of our Thursday night Begans webinars. My name is Costa Georgiadis, and I am very excited to be a part of this initiative of what we've called Botanic Gardens Month. So over the next 4 Thursdays at 7 p.m, we're going to have these chats with some wonderful guest speakers, and I'm really excited to be able to bring these speakers to you and to share their incredible experience and skills and knowledge. To get things underway, I'd just like to mention that I am here in the Gold Coast of Australia, and I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the people of the Yugambeh language group. They are the traditional owners of the land where I am sitting, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all Torres Strait Island and Aboriginal peoples who are joining the broadcast, or even better, watching the replay at a later date. As you can imagine, everything about Botanic Gardens Day and everything about the science that is taking place in our botanic gardens across Australia and New Zealand, BEGANS, that's the acronym for anyone that's not quite up to speed with it. It's all about caring for country, the country where we live. And tomorrow I'll be going and visiting the local botanic gardens here on the Gold Coast on actual Botanic Gardens Day. At the end of the month, I will be up in Cairns, and between that time and then I'll be visiting botanic gardens in Ballarat, Sydney, Melbourne and Perth as well. And there may even be another one in between. But it's fantastic that the month of May is building a reputation as a month to celebrate our botanic gardens. Just a quick question. Let us know where you are joining the broadcast from. Let us know which town, which state, and if you know the country you're on, share the country that you're on as well, so that we can all benefit from where you're joining us for tonight's webinar. Hello, Jean. Hello, Narelle, Susan. It's lovely to have you all here. So feel free to let us know where you're coming in from for the broadcast. Well, where to begin with this, our first broadcast. It's wonderful to, this is a topic that's very close to my heart, because the reason I'm up here in the Gold Coast is I've been at the National Biosecurity Symposium. It's the second National Biosecurity Symposium that we've had here in Australia. The first one was 3 years ago, and the reason I like to make this connection is because so much of the work that's being done by our scientific staff in Botanic Gardens, the botanists, is about looking after our plant health across Australia and New Zealand, and looking after that is a big thing, because this is about growing our understanding of our plants. And that's all to do with science communication. Science communication is the way that we build engagement, the way we get people excited about plants, the way we get them to visit our gardens, the way we get them to develop careers into horticulture, into nursery, into ecology, into biology, into laboratory science, into nursery and wholesale, retail. There's so many places, into land care, into national parks, Indigenous ranger work. That's really the basis on which we want these talks, to provide inspiration for people to look at the incredible work that's being done by our botanic gardens to care for country, but to get the message out. And our two speakers today, Toni and Raydeen, are going to talk to us about exactly that. This is all about interpretation, engagement, and plant stories, as you would have seen. Toni Roberts is a designer and director with Hatchling Studio, while Raydeen, Cuffe, is from the Wellington Botanic Gardens, and she's a visitor experience team manager. So you can see how between those two, they're working in information exchange, how we engage and get people connected to the wonderful stories that not only they're sharing, be it at the Wellington Gardens, but the other speakers that we're going to talk to next week and the weeks after. How do they get their stories across? So I'm just thinking I'll just bring Toni and Raydeen on. Good evening, Toni.
Hi, Costa. Yep, I'm right here. Thanks so much. I'm very good, and I'm coming from Bunurong country this evening.
Fantastic. And I'll just bring Raydeen in. Raydeen.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm coming to you from New Zealand.
Fantastic. And whereabouts exactly?
Oh, in Wellington.
In Wellington. All right. Well, as you know, our topic for today is about communication. I'm happy, if you like, just to throw to you both briefly, just to share where you're coming at with your communication, and then we'll go to both of your talks. We'll start with Toni, but Toni, if you just want to give us a minute or two on what you're wanting to share with us during the or just the broad picture of your work in communication.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Costa. So I really focus on interpretation, development, and design and planning. I became involved in interpretation about 15 years ago when I worked for a company that did exhibitions and public space kind of work. And I became so fascinated with it that I did a PhD on it and really wanted to investigate the practice and particularly how we can connect people with the natural world. And since then, I've taken on a wide range of projects in all kinds of different sites. I guess for me, interpretation is particularly about creating experiences for people. So I don't talk so much about information or perhaps a bit about education, but mostly about connection and creating experiences and impact for people. So I'm going to talk about the Care for the Rare project that I've been working on with the Royal Botanic Gardens and 6 regional gardens around Victoria, supporting them to develop an interpretation strategy for their Care for the Rare collection.
Fantastic. I look forward to hearing more about that, Toni. And just a brief intro for people, Raydeen, on where your work connects you to that idea of science communication.
Yeah. So tonight I'll be talking about the two projects that we've been working on here at Wellington Gardens in reimagining interpretation and reimagining engagement in our current climate. So whether that's in through a bicultural lens or through the lens of COVID, and how we've had to pivot in those spaces, and how we've use those as opportunities to reach wider audiences and tell better stories.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, everyone. That's a quick windshield of what Toni and Raydeen are going to cover off on. So, Toni, let's head over to you and yeah, tell us a little bit about the project you want to share.
Okay, I will just share some slides with you.
Okay, I'll make some space. Oh, I think we've lost. I think we lost Toni in the share there. She will hopefully return. Oops. That's oh, here she comes. I heard a little beep, but maybe Raydeen, maybe we might have to, maybe we jump across to you, and are you happy to go while we bring
Yep.
Toni back in?
No problem.
All right. Well, I'll put you onto the screen, and away you go. Oh, okay. And I'll add the.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, cool. Okay, yep. So, see, this is a photo of Wellington Gardens. Oh, sorry, that's it. Sorry, Toni Roberts bush. There we go. So one of the projects that we worked on over the last few years was the reimagining of Otari Wilton's Bush Visitor Center. So it had originally been built and commissioned in the 90s. So this was our opportunity to reimagine telling our stories through a bicultural lens. Like many organizations, we're looking for ways to recognize and support the storytelling of our Mana Whenua, the people of our land or indigenous communities. And this project was a collaboration with Story Design, who looked at the design and construction of the project, and as well as Cassandra Barnett, who was our main writer. And she worked very closely with two advisors who were recognized by Taranaki Whanui, who is our Mana Whenua. And so that was Holden Tohaia and Teresa McLeod. And they all worked very closely also with the Wellington Gardens staff. Let's see, the next slide. So this was our, like I said, opportunity to reimagine and reinvigorate this space. And so we took a partnership approach with Taranaki Whanui rather than a stakeholder approach. And this was to get a deeper and better outcome for all of us. So we felt that by focusing in on that relationship building and that really understanding the stories that they felt were dear to them and wanted to be told, and looking for opportunities to do that. So if you look, so the picture on the left is of the old visitor center before the renovations. It's very dark and very foresty colors, which I think makes sense for the day, but we've gone with a new, brighter approach, and that's the image on the right. And then on the floor, you can see the outline and the shape of Moko, our 500-year-old rimu. So this was used to tell the story of Taranaki Whanui and the iwis that were in this area leading up to now, and different events leading along the way. So we looked at, sorry, the images, there we go. So we looked at creating an open space and also making a launch pad for looking at the wider gardens and exploring, encouraging people to rest here, but it really is focusing on the wider space. And through this process of working with Taranaki Whanui, they gifted us a new name for the visitor center, so Tane Whakapiripiri, which is one of the many names of Tane, which is a gathering and resting in Tane. And so, let's see, continue through. Yeah, so as you can see from the images, there isn't a whole lot of text on the walls. We've compiled a lot of that text-heavy interpretation into a digital screen, which is presented in both English and Te Reo. And we've included visual aids to help orient visitors, because this is a very large tract of land. So the maps on the tables can be used by our hosts and the guides to orient people and show them places that they can go. And then on the walls, we've also highlighted plants that people might see outside to bring that connection.
What sort of time frame are we up to with the project?
So it is almost all completed. So next to the screen on that image in the right hand, there are 3 panels that are wood panels that are going to be in the process of being carved and will be installed on that far wall. But after that, it'll be completed. So yeah.
So how far along is it? How much time has been spent on the set out to this point?
So it's been about a 2-year process of going through this process of developing and producing the space. It's because of our engagement with Taranaki Whānui, it's you go at a different pace, and because it's that relationship building, and this has been a pivotal project for us in our relationship with Taranaki Whānui to ensure that we are getting those stories right. We have taken a slower pace with that. Okay, so the second project I was going to talk about is the reimagining of Gardens Magic. So this is an amazing photo of a huge crowd of people that, given COVID, can't go ahead. So this last year, we reimagined what a outdoor event in the gardens could look like given COVID. So we were given the task of figuring out an event that would be able to be delivered at any of the alert levels, restrictions. And so we went from a short 3-hour evening event to an all-day event that encouraged people to social distance and explore the wider gardens as well as a defined space. So our Gardens Magic turns into the Gardens Trail. And so that we are able to engage with a wider audience because it wasn't just that evening block. We were able to get more families in, and the focus with this event was much more focused on plants and place, whereas the previous iteration with Gardens Magic, it was more focused on the event, the musicians and that sort of thing, as well as the light displays. But this year's presentation was much more focused on plants, which we're really excited about, as well as plants as well as art in amongst the plants. And so we were able to achieve this by partnering with our traditional partners, so Kane Mail and MJF Lighting, as well as Catherine Mansfield, to look at something new that we could do with this in this space, and really leveraging those ideas and being able to make something new together. And then we also went the route of the quirky op shop creations. So we've got some frames that we got off op shops, as well as some teddy bears. We made a teddy bear picnic in the fairy village, and just these quirky little things that people have unique and fun memories in our green spaces. And because if people don't have a connection to the green spaces, then they're not going to go out and champion those spaces for us and for our councils and governments to preserve those and to fund those spaces. And so that was one of the key things that I wanted to achieve with that. And so I'll go ahead and end there. Costa?
Thanks, Raydeen. Now, Toni, sorry about that. We lost you there at some point. I'm not quite sure what happened, but that's all right because you're back in.
Okay, I'm back.
And we can let me see if we can remove that. And now, if you want to share your screen and away you go. again.
I'm a little nervous about doing it again, but hopefully it will work this time.
Yeah, here it is.
Is that going full screen, or do I need to set it?
There it is. Perfect.
Okay, we're
yeah,
good.
Here we go. Round two.
Hallelujah.
Good on you, Toni.
Okay.
That's patience, resilience.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the Care for the Rare project, and well, at least the interpretation development part of it. So I was brought into the Care for the Rare project to develop a strategy for interpreting the rare and threatened plants in 6 regional botanic gardens in Victoria. It's a project run by Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria with support from the Helen Macpherson Smith Trust. And the whole project is about curating and cultivating regional rare and threatened plant collections. And my part of it was about supporting the gardens to interpret these collections. So these are some images from Cranbourne Gardens where the plants have been cultivated and tested for their longevity in a garden bed. And these are just images of the 6 botanic gardens that have been involved so far. And these are some of the garden beds where their rare and threatened plants are going. Some are already quite well established and some are still going in. So this isn't, my presentation's not so much about the end result, but the process in getting there. Some of these gardens have very limited resources, but they're big on passion for their plants and for their regions. So it's been wonderful to work with them. I'm all about developing a strategy, a plan that gives you something to work to as you develop your interpretation over time, as budget allows. So together with the Royal Botanic Gardens team, I met with each garden. In some cases, this was just a couple of people, and in other cases, it was a whole team. And as you can see, we were heavily impacted, of course, by COVID and all the travel restrictions. So where normally I would go to site and run workshops with people to understand their site and their context and what it is they're wanting to communicate to their visitors, we had to be very agile, as they say, and do it all online through a series of Teams meetings. And as well as that, some of these gardens got quite creative and did some little home videos for us to show us around the garden so we could understand where this garden bed, this Care for the Rare collection, kind of sat within the broader site. So today I'm just going to talk you through some of the things that I covered with these gardens. I'm really trying to build their capacity to do their own interpretation. It's not so much about my role in this anyway, hasn't been so much about doing it for people, but helping them, support them to develop a strategy for their garden. So a few key principles and practices of interpretation include starting with your audience. So understand your visitors. Your visitors might come to the garden for a whole range of reasons. Most visitors are not planning to come to the Botanic Gardens to learn complex scientific information. So they have other reasons for coming, and then what we want to do is grab their interest and kind of corral them a bit into learning about things that they might not have planned to learn about. These visitors might also have some other interests that you can capitalize on through public programs or activities or other kinds of displays. So they might be interested in art, plant pressing, photography, that sort of thing. So you might be able to create displays that draw them in through those kinds of means. Another key principle is to develop your aims. Consider what type of experience and impact you want to generate. So I have this think, feel, do method that or model that I developed in my PhD. It's very simple. There are other kind of versions of this sort of thing used in, I think, marketing and other fields, but it has a very particular purpose in this interpretation field. So I think that experiences can be primarily driven by thinking, feeling, or doing, or some intersection of those. And I'll give you some examples from interpretation in different contexts. So, thinking is primarily focused on informative displays. Um, so, we're all familiar, I think, with information-based kind of signs. But then if you add the thinking and feeling, you might be adding physical models, a bit of humor, other kinds of sensory elements to a display. The feeling can be emotional. It can be tactile and physical. So I've just given some examples here from a few different locations as well. Feeling and doing. So that includes things like responsive environments. This one, some people might know it's from Werribee Zoo, and it's a little wobbly sort of rope bridge that you walk across that activates the sound of lions and other predators in the bushes nearby.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a real sensory moment where you get
Yeah,
people
that's right.
freaking out as that the lions are coming for them.
Yeah. So just pure doing can be undirected play and exploring. Doing and thinking might include things like comparing, collecting, and interacting. And then thinking, feeling, and doing combined, that kind of sweet spot in the middle can include educational play, social interaction, which is a really important thing, and sensory learning. So I'm kind of whipping through this, but I'm just trying to give you a
No,
bit of
that's
a
all right.
flavour of the kind of stuff that we covered in these workshops that I ran with people. Um, and then they were asked to develop their think, feel, do strategy for their garden. So it can look like something like this. We want visitors to understand how special these rare and threatened plants are. We want our visitors to feel pride in their local environment and in the garden. And we want our visitors to take more notice of native plants and consider them for their home gardens. So you can see already that those three statements really do form the basis for an interpretation strategy and help to guide what kinds of media you might want to create, and also the language and the text and the images that might accompany those, how you might start to craft your stories. So the next thing is your assets. What resources can you use to communicate these stories? And I always think you've got to start with people. People are your greatest asset. And so a lot of gardens have volunteers, they have friends groups, staff might be already fairly stretched fairly thin, but there are also your local schools and your community. So you can often draw on the people that are immediately connected with the garden, but also broader groups, and get them involved in running guided walks, activities, games, um, and you can also get schools involved in things like ceramics activities where they're pressing plants into clay or whatever. They might end up as tiles that you can use on a wall or in a path, that so that sort of temporary public activity turns into a permanent interpretive installation as well. Another of your key assets is your site. So think about how can you use the kinds of things that you've already got. It might be a path or a wall, and how can you adapt that and make it into a more interpretive kind of element. So the fruit loop there from Mount Annan Botanic Garden had plants pressed into the concrete. And you might think, well, what's that really telling people? It's just a sort of nice textural element, but it does actually tell you quite a bit about the form of those plants, the scale of those plants. And it can also just get people a bit curious and intrigued and want to follow that path and see where it leads.
That's true, Toni. I've walked on that path, and
Right.
it does make you look down with purpose, and
Yeah.
and actually stop and ask some questions, and yeah, it's not lost underfoot, I can safely say.
And another lot of assets that you can use, you might have existing structures like railings or a shelter. So you might be able to attach things to those rather than having to build a completely new structure, a new sign or something for your interpretation. And so then you can start thinking about other media as well if you do have a bit of a budget. We all know about signage, so I haven't really included that, but you can also think about sculptural things that might pique people's interest and think, well, why is there a wire? I think that was a moth up in the tree. And then want to find out a bit more about that. Playing with scale and materials can again draw people's interest. The giant land snails again at Mount Annan, they're really giant and they draw your attention. You think, what the hell is going on here? And so then you want to find out about the real giant land snails. And then with print media also, you can use you can get your visitors involved. You can get school groups and other community groups involved in creating illustrations, basically using them to do stuff for you that you can then produce and share with visitors more widely. And some digital stuff can also be quite lo-fi. So, I'm thinking about, what you can do on a budget here. So audio can be very cheap. It can be quite fun to actually make it lo-fi and personal. And this is one particular person's walk around the garden and the things that they notice and experience. And then you might get someone else to do one. So you have multiple kind of perspectives on a place rather than necessarily fixed, single perspective, formal interpretation. So once you've kind of worked through some of those things, then you can actually start to think about how you want to craft your stories and using that strategy to develop compelling stories. For this project, it's interesting working with plant people because they're very passionate about their plants, which of course is wonderful. But I also wanted to use those plants, I think, to tell bigger stories and connect with the bigger stories that are certainly impacting all of our natural environments and that are causing some of these plants to become rare and threatened. So we chose particular species to talk about particular issues, things like the impacts of climate change, the role of fire in the natural landscape, and symbiotic relationships in ecosystems that might also occur in the home garden. So we took this, sometimes it's also good to bring in a little bit of humor. We talked a bit about how kind of unexciting some of these precious gems are, and they're the sorts of plants that a lot of people might rip out because they think they're weeds. I think it's important to highlight that the precious things in our natural environment are not always big and dramatic. Sometimes they're the scrappy little less noticeable plants that still have a really interesting story to tell. So I'm going to stop there. We haven't finished the project. I don't have, wonderful end products to show you. It's much more talking about the process. And what we've now done is I've extended this project into a design studio for my students at RMIT, and they're now starting to generate a range of different potential outcomes for these gardens. So it's kind of a stay tuned, and we'll share more as things start to get implemented.
Wow. So I'll just bring us back. So Toni, just on that topic, your work with Hatchling Studio, explain a little bit about the scope. Are you specialised in a particular area of communication?
Yeah, so Hatchling Studio is basically me and then whoever I collaborate with on a particular project. So I focus on interpretation planning and strategy, and then I work with designers, exhibition designers, graphic designers, landscape designers, depending on the context, where we're working. Just, I'm working on another project up in the northern stretch of the Merri Creek. I've worked on projects at Auckland Zoo and Canberra and different places,
I think Dee Carter has summed it up nicely. This just makes you want to visit more gardens. Exactly, Dee. I like that. Now, Raydeen, who were some of the people that you worked on in the projects? Given Toni just sort of explained that she's with graphic designers, with landscape architects. What sort of scope of work? Who did you bring in?
So for example, with the Gardens Trail project, we worked with a lot of different people for that. So we had Wellington Gardens is a part of Wellington City Council, and so there's another branch of council that focuses exclusively on events. So we partnered with them, and they usually deliver the Gardens Magic concert series, and so we partnered with them, as well as there's the MJF Lighting, who they do lighting for events, as well as other displays throughout Wellington. And so it was a really good opportunity for us to, particularly with COVID, be able to invest money in event organizers and those sorts of things that are currently or were not having as much cash flow. So we're able to kind of utilize some of that. And then Kane Mail was another artist who we worked with for the big chandeliers in the gardens.
Yeah. So we had a question here from Tim for both of you. Is the digital medium a consideration in your work in Botanic Gardens?
I think it is, yeah, definitely. There are times when you don't want to direct people to screens, but the handheld, the phone or the iPad is more than just a screen. I think audio particularly has a really important role to play, because you can still be very much immersed in the environment that you're in, but getting some other story and getting some other kind of layer to that experience.
Yeah, we're looking into doing some audio guides as well here at Wellington Gardens. And yeah, that's something that we're really excited about. But like you said, it's a medium that is at everybody's fingertips, and it is that fine balance of having a grounding and sense of place, but also in those times where you do want to find out what that plant is, and like being able to use programs like iNaturalist to identify plants, and encouraging people to go to reputable places to get those identifications if they're out just amongst the plants.
Thanks, Raydeen. And Toni, what did you glean from working with 6 different gardens?
Yes, thanks, John, for that question.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Look, they're all really different and have their own character. And that's why I just think it's important to develop a strategy for your garden rather than, one option for the Care for the Rare project could have been this is what Care for the Rare is, and this is, like a sort of blanket approach.
Blanket approach, yeah.
And I just think each garden has such a unique kind of history and style in the garden. Some were historically very European style gardens, and they're just moving into Australian native plants, and it's a real shift of character to focus on the rare and threatened. Whereas there are other regional gardens that have always been, as very Australian native gardens. So that, and also they have quite different reference environments of where those rare and threatened plants have come from, and those environments have different stories. Some are about climate change and alpine areas. Others, the big story might be fire or agriculture. Yeah.
Raydeen, is there a general time frame on projects like the two that you explained to us, or do you find that just keeps evolving?
That's a bit of a hard question. So the visitor center interpretation, that I think, particularly if you're wanting to engage new groups or engage people who you want to be approaching from a relationship standpoint rather than a stakeholder standpoint, starting early, starting as early as possible is my biggest tip. Because you don't want to necessarily go into those conversations having a fully formed idea and no place for collaboration. And so I think having that time to build those relationships is quite key. So starting early, I think, is probably the best advice.
It's interesting.
I'd agree with that, particularly if you're working with traditional owners. I mean, you want to consult with traditional owners anyway, but if you're wanting to work closely with them and with any community groups, really, you need the time to build those relationships and allow the project to develop. Other projects can be quite contained and have a really defined time frame and budget, and be clearly planned for and implemented. You can do a mix.
I just this comment on the screen there, Mrs. York's, that's a garden at Port Macquarie, which is been reinvigorated. It was developed by an incredible lady back in the early part of the last century, just on a steep slope heading down towards the lower sort of dunes towards the beach, and it's been reinvigorated by an incredible community group, and it's exactly that as you said, Raydeen, it's just moving along, and I was fortunate enough to go and visit after not having been there for 3 years, and to see the next stairs down to an outdoor seating hut, and more interpretation signs, and some deck and staircase has been finished, and all these things, and the interpretation there. I think they were looking at me as I walked around. I was taking all these photos because, okay, this is great, and I can share this information with other people, other community gardens wanting interpretation ideas. And I think both of your stories, Toni and Raydeen, have been really helpful for not just gardens, botanic gardens per se, but in incubating these ideas for anyone in garden world, let's say.
Yeah, I'd hope so. And national parks, natural environments, all sorts of places we can celebrate flora. Even in urban parks, doesn't we're not limited in where we can do this kind of work to connect people with the natural environment.
I got one more question here from Barry Myring. I'll just throw it up on the screen and you can both have a read of it. Looks fantastic. When we think of engagement with our community visitors as a botanic garden through interpretation, engagement, telling stories, how would you measure the success of what a garden already has in place when they have done development?
Yeah, evaluation is tricky. It's hard to do. Ideally, any garden should develop some methods for visitor feedback, and connection with their community, so that they know what their community and visitors think and feel about their garden. I think before doing a new project, it's always worth evaluating what you have, what are your strengths that you already have, so that any new addition to that is complementary.
What are your thoughts there, Raydeen?
I think some of it can be just observational in terms of like, are people actually stopping and looking at the interpretation that you've installed? If people are just walking by, not engaging it, then it's not hitting the mark. And so some of it can be that observational, doing spot surveys as well as an option. Surveying has become much easier. There's a lot of different apps that you can use to do like a five question survey, those sorts of things, and just to get some of that feedback, some of that engagement. And oftentimes when you stop somebody to ask them to take a survey or to answer a few questions, you can't get away from them. And so it can be a bit of a hit and miss. But I think that, yeah, just being out there and observing what people are doing in the spaces is also really helpful.
Barry's
I think it's really important to do, but it does take time. Yeah, you do need staff to do it.
Yeah, Barry's just followed up with a couple of comments here about a technical review in 2017 that stated botanic gardens around the world should measure visitor satisfaction more. Why does that keep popping out? More than what's done at present. I suppose a final thought on that.
Oh, look, I think it's a challenge for a lot of public environments, not just for botanic gardens, and also because botanic gardens are often not defined with, an entry and exit point. People can wander in and out from multiple points. It can be quite a challenge to gather that kind of information. But yeah, there are ways you can do it, and I think particularly now that a lot of gardens have Friends of the Botanic Gardens groups who have Facebook groups, probably using social media is one of the cheaper ways to gather that kind of feedback.
Yeah, that's what Diane said here. But Emma Simpkins, I don't know if you know Emma Raydeen, but Auckland Botanic Gardens surveys visitors every year and provides valuable information for our planning.
And like I said before, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just saying that's great. I think surveys, they do provide it. Asking the right questions as well is also key to that. And so doing a bit of research before you do your surveying to make sure that the questions that you ask are going to give you valuable information that you can do planning off of.
Anything to add to that, Toni?
No, not really. No.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've expired all the questions. Thanks everyone. This one I didn't put up. The Relief Lake Macquarie. We agree. There's some great ideas we can use in our tree trail.
So that sounds good.
That does sound good, doesn't it, Raydeen and Toni? That it's nice to know that there's people talking, and I don't know if you saw that one earlier from Tim, but and I think this is really valid to what you both just answered. Like gardens, interpretation evolves too, because it's we've all seen interpretation and signage that's just kind of done its time, and you just think it's. And they recently did that in quite a few areas in the Sydney Botanic Gardens, and they put in a whole lot of wonderful new interpretive, interactive signage and information that you were talking about, Toni. It's sensory, colourful, and really valuable. And it's always nice to see when I'm there filming, seeing people at those points stopped, and just doing this and just reading, and you think, wow, all your efforts, ultimately, you don't necessarily get to see them, but they're the moments when someone takes that little bit of information. You just think, yeah, Raydeen and Toni, oof.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people in the chain in terms of all the information and how it's been crafted, and then how the design happens, and then how it was constructed to last, and all those things. But when someone gets something from it, that's really what it's about. And whether it's your gardens there in Wellington or the garden up at Port Macquarie, Mrs. York, or whether it's a school garden, it really is. This is such a critical part of our education moving forward.
Yeah, I guess I have one more thing I'd like to say, which is, I sort of said this earlier, but this idea of experience over information. You don't need to tell people everything. You just need to tell them a couple of things that spark their interest and get them involved, because they can Google information. You want them to want to Google the information. It's that getting them connected, getting them interested, and getting them engaged that is the key.
Well put.
Yeah. That's totally, Raydeen, and that's exactly out of the songbook of TV making. Like, we can't come to either of you and your projects and tell every last bit of it, but it's that morsel, the old 5 points. It's now 1 or 2 points, as you say. That's enough. People's capacity to take it in. They constantly got information coming in, and if you start jamming, a 5-course meal when all they want is a piece of a chip, well, it's kind of all just being wasted, and they'll walk past. They'll go, oh, that's too much.
Yeah, look, I work in interpretation. If I see a block of text, my eyes glaze over. I just want a little snippet.
Fantastic. Well, look, to everyone that's joined us, thank you for all your comments. Thank you for your questions. It's been fantastic to see all the chatter on the chat. Raydeen and Toni, it's been great. I was really looking forward, and I was happy that this was an opening one, because it's for our first Thursday night Botanic Gardens chat. It was a wonderful way to come in and talk about interpretation and talk about information. And this in itself, doing a webinar like this is a new form of communication. But
Absolutely.
For a Thursday night, it's a short little session to spark some ideas. People can watch it later. Lots of comments coming in. Thanks, Marcella. Thanks, Karen Freeman. Thanks, Francis Marnie, for your thanks. Everyone saying thanks. So the only other things to add are that, as you can see on the banner, we're gearing this all into Botanic Gardens Day, which is at the end of the month. Our next session, which is going to be next Thursday. I'll just put that up here, and you can see it. It's on. So all you carnivorous plant lovers, get excited, because carnivorous and rare plants will be hearing from Greg Burke and Matt Coulter, two people who absolutely dive and swim around deeply in the world of carnivorous and rare plants. So they'll be joining us next week. Also remember that the Plant Lovers Challenge is on this month. Take the Plant Lovers Challenge with begans.org.au if you head there for details. And basically, we want to hear your story. Take a photo, make a little video, and share it with us, so that we can hear your plant love, and we can share your plant love with everyone else who's out there. It also is a case of finding you're in a botanist, if you want to think of it another way. But either way, let's gear all this up to the 29th of the 29th of May, where we can celebrate Botanic Gardens Day at your local garden. As I said earlier, I'll be at the Cairns Botanic Garden. Will you be down at your garden, Raydeen?
I will. I'll be here at Wellington Botanic Garden. Fantastic.
And well, you're going to be in the garden any which way. You're in the garden every day, Raydeen, with all of the work that you're doing. and Toni, your installations mean that every day is Botanic Garden Day for you.
Yeah, and I have the choice of Melbourne, Cranbourne, two pretty good options near me.
Oh, you do too. Well, look, thank you all. Thank you both very much for joining us, and big thanks to all of our viewers tonight and to all of our replay viewers. And I'll see you all here again next Thursday at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Toni. Thanks, Raydeen.
Thanks, Costa.
Thanks,
See you later. Thanks, everyone.